I've never cared about fancy titles or trying to impress people. I like working with my hands, solving problems, and earning my own way. When I started in HVAC at 19, most people thought it was just a temporary job, but I stuck with it. I learned fast, picked up certifications, and started taking private repair calls in addition to my regular work. By 22, I had saved enough to buy my own service truck. It wasn't brand new, but it was paid for in mine. Even with all that, Madison never saw any pride in what I did. She always carried herself like she was above everyone else. She wasn't rich or successful yet, but she acted like her future was guaranteed to be bigger than everyone around her. She used to correct people when they asked about our family. If someone mentioned me, she'd say something like, "Oh, Ethan fixes air conditioners," like I was a handyman who wandered in off the street. My parents never really stepped in when she talked like that. They didn't insult me, but they also never stopped her. My dad would change the topic, and my mom would sigh and pretend not to hear it. I got used to it. I told myself I didn't need approval to know I was doing fine. I had my own place, paid my bills on time, and helped out when they needed repairs at home. They never had to call anyone else because I always showed up. I also never told anyone how much I was covering behind the scenes. When our grandmother passed, she left a fund meant to help with college costs. I was trusted to manage it because I was the only one she believed would handle it responsibly. Madison didn't know the details. She just assumed our parents or some scholarship was covering things. Each semester, I quietly handled the tuition and the housing payments. I never bragged about it, never asked for thanks, and never used it to remind her of anything. I thought that keeping the peace was better than calling attention to things. When Thanksgiving came around, I was already juggling a few service calls that week because the weather had dropped fast. Old systems start struggling when that happens. Still, I made time to be at the house early because my parents' place always has heating problems when there's a big crowd. I checked the vents, reset the thermostat, and made sure everything would stay warm through dinner. No one else could have done it without calling a company, and I wanted them to enjoy the day without worrying. I washed up and changed shirts before going into the dining room, but Madison still looked at me like I'd dragged mud through the house. She didn't ask how I was or say thanks for showing up early. She just looked irritated that I existed in the same space. It was obvious she had planned to act a certain way in front of everyone, and I was just another thing she had to manage, so it didn't ruin her image. I noticed it right away, but I let it go. I didn't walk in expecting. Madison has always been the type to walk into a room and make sure everyone notices her. She talks like she's already sitting in some big office downtown, even though she still has semesters left before graduating. If someone brings up careers, she finds a way to say she's on track to be an attorney. Like the rest of us are placeholders until her success finally arrives. She wears the title before she's earned it, and she expects people to treat her like she's already made it. To her, what someone does for work determines their value. If you don't fit her idea of professional, she keeps you at a distance. She never hides how she feels about trade jobs. She acts like there's something you do when life goes wrong. When she introduces me to someone new, she only says he fixes ACs, and moves on fast, like she's embarrassed to be related to me. She never asks how I'm doing, never wants to know how much work goes into what I do, and definitely never asks how much I make, because that would ruin the image she's built in her head. What she doesn't realize is how much she's been depending on the same person she looks down on. When our grandmother passed, she didn't leave long speeches or letters of advice. She set things up in a way she thought would help quietly. She put me in charge of the money meant to help with school. There were no instructions about how to explain it to anyone. She trusted me to handle it without turning it into drama. I started covering Madison's tuition, housing fees, and books without making any announcements. I handled the paperwork, tracked the payments, and made sure nothing was delayed. The bills didn't go to her. They went to the account I managed. She never questioned why nothing ever bounced or why she never had to sit out a semester. She assumed things were falling into place because she was meant to succeed. Even when she complained about little things, saying she deserved better housing or nicer furniture, I stayed quiet. I didn't correct her or remind her who was keeping the whole thing together. I chose not to tell her because I knew she'd find a way to twist it. She'd either act like I owed it to her, or she'd accuse me of trying to control something that involved her future. Silence kept it clean. She treated everything like it was guaranteed. If she needed a new laptop or extra fees came up, she'd make comments about how financial aid should be covering this, like the universe itself was designed to support her goals. She moved through life with the confidence of someone who had never felt a real consequence. The gap between how she acted and how things actually worked kept growing. She built herself up while quietly standing on the help she didn't know she was getting. Every time she brushed me off or made a joke about my job, I'd think about how different her life would look if I stepped back just once. I never said anything, but but the thought stayed tucked away, waiting for the moment she pushed too far. Affection, but I also didn't expect what happened next. Thanksgiving at our parents' place has always been the one event everyone shows up for, no matter what's going on. They live in Ohio in the same house we grew up in. It's not small, but when the whole family comes over, the place heats up fast and the air system struggles. I knew that from past years, so I decided to get there ahead of everyone else. When I pulled into the driveway, only my dad's truck and my mom's car were there. Inside, my mom was already busy in the kitchen, going back and forth between the stove and the counter. My dad was in the dining room trying to move furniture around to make space for the extra chairs. They both greeted me in a normal way, nothing warm but nothing cold either. My mom said the upstairs vents weren't blowing enough air, and asked me if I could take a look before people arrived. I didn't need to be asked twice. I came prepared with tools in my truck. I went to the basement and checked the unit first. The filter hadn't been replaced in months, and one of the ducts was half blocked. It wasn't a hard fix, just one of those things that would have cost them a few $100s if they'd called someone else. While I worked, my dad came down to hand me a flashlight, then went back upstairs without asking anything more. I didn't take it personally. I've gotten used to fixing problems in silence. After adjusting the duct and resetting the breaker, I went room to room to make sure the air was flowing right. By the time I finished, I could feel the difference. The house felt more comfortable, and the temperature stopped jumping. I washed my hands in the guest bathroom, changed into a clean shirt I brought with me, and went to the living room. Not long after, cars started showing up. First was Aunt Janet, like she always does, carrying 2 pies and a bag of random things she thinks the house might need. Then came my brother Caleb, who's 23 and still figuring out his path. He gave me a nod and asked if the air was working this time. I told him it was fine now. He didn't ask for details, which was typical. 2 of our cousins showed up next, making noise as soon as they stepped inside. The house started filling with voices, coats getting tossed on hooks, and people heading straight for the food smells in the kitchen. I stayed out of the way, listening more than talking. I watched them settle in, thinking that at least the place wouldn't feel stuffy this year. I didn't see Madison yet, and I wasn't exactly waiting for her. I figured she'd come later, after most people were already there, just to make an entrance. I stayed near the hallway for a bit, making sure no one messed with the thermostat or shut any vents. I wasn't trying to get praise. I just wanted things to run smoothly so nobody complained later. Everything felt normal at that point. I had done my part, the house was comfortable, and people were settling in without thinking twice about why it felt better than last year. I didn't expect anything dramatic. I wasn't looking for trouble. I just wanted to eat with my family and leave quietly when the night was over. I didn't know the tone of the. I walked into the dining room thinking I'd just grab a seat and blend in like everyone else. The table was already set with the good dishes, the ones our mom only brings out on holidays. I pulled out a chair near the end, not trying to take anyone's spot. Before I could even sit, Madison looked up from across the table. The expression on her face was sharp, like I had tracked mud on the carpet. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't wait until people weren't looking. She said, clear enough for the whole room to hear, "Can you not sit at the main table? This is for family and guests, not workers." For a second, I honestly thought she was making some kind of weird joke. I waited for her to smirk or say she was kidding, but her face stayed the same. Cold. Annoyed. Like I had crossed a line just by existing near her. She pointed her hand toward the counter near the kitchen, where the younger cousins were already sitting on stools. It wasn't some casual suggestion. It was an instruction. The room got quiet for a moment, not totally silent, but the kind of quiet where people pretend they didn't hear what they clearly heard. My brother looked down at his plate. My aunt glanced at me, then back at the table. Nobody stepped in. Nobody said she was out of line. They just let it hang there like it was normal. I let go of the chair I was about to sit in and stood still for a moment. I didn't want to show anything on my face. I didn't want to make a scene or give her the reaction she probably expected. The kids at the counter weren't even paying attention to what was happening. They were busy arguing over bread rolls and napkins. I wasn't angry yet, more stunned than anything. My mom was in the kitchen, moving dishes around, and I could tell she heard it, but didn't want to step into it. She glanced over, then pretended she needed to check something on the stove. My dad stayed seated and didn't look my way. Madison went back to talking to one of our cousins like nothing had happened. I didn't argue with her or try to force my seat back. I didn't want to beg for a chair in a house I grew up in. Instead, I stood there for a few seconds, trying to keep my voice even. I didn't say anything to her. I just nodded once, more out of disbelief than agreement, and stepped back from the table. Walking toward the counter, I felt eyes on me even while they pretended not to be looking. The kitchen smelled like turkey and stuffing, and the laughter from the living room kept going like nothing was wrong. I sat on an empty stool next to one of the younger kids who didn't even glance my way. I kept my hands folded and stayed quiet. I could have pushed back, but I didn't want to start anything in the middle of dinner. I didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting. I just sat there, taking in the fact that it wasn't a misunderstanding. She meant it exactly how it sounded. Whole day would change the moment she walked through the door. I sat at the counter and tried to act like it didn't bother me. I focused on the food being brought out and the voices in the background. I told myself to let it pass so the day wouldn't turn into a scene. But Madison didn't stop. She walked past me on her way to the kitchen and said loud enough for others to hear, "Did you even shower after crawling around in vents? You smell like tools." She wrinkled her nose like I was something she needed to move away from. I didn't answer. I kept my eyes on the table in front of me. I could feel a few people glance over, then look away quickly like they didn't want to get dragged into it. Before I could settle back into silence, she spoke again when she saw me holding a plate. "Can you not bring that over here?" she said. "Thanksgiving isn't a job site. You don't have to track your work everywhere you go." She said it as if she was doing everyone a favor. Nobody laughed, but nobody said she was out of line either. My dad cleared his throat once, then looked down. My mom wiped her hands on a towel and pretended she didn't hear. Caleb avoided eye contact. I kept waiting for someone to tell her that enough was enough, but the room just continued moving like her words were normal. I could feel heat in my face, not from anger yet, just embarrassment. I wasn't dirty. I had cleaned up before coming into the dining room. I had fixed their heating so everyone could sit there comfortably. Still, she made me feel like I was an intruder. I didn't want to make things worse or snap back and give her more reason to treat me like I didn't belong. I took a breath and stayed still. I told myself to keep my head down, eat quietly, and leave early once dinner was over. I tried to focus on my plate instead of the whispers. The kids at the counter didn't care about any of it, and part of me was grateful for the distraction of their noise. Even then, I felt something settle in the back of my mind. It wasn't anger all at once, more like a quiet shift. I started noticing how easily everyone let her talk to me like that. No one stepped in, not to defend me or even change the subject. It was like I was supposed to take it because of what I do for a living. I didn't raise my voice or ask her to stop. I thought staying calm was the best option at that moment. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of reacting, and I didn't want to turn the holiday into a shouting match. But the more I sat there listening to her talk down to me, the more it became clear that what she thought of me had been there all along. When the food was finally laid out, everyone started moving toward the main table. People were filling plates, passing dishes around, finding their seats. I waited until the crowd settled a bit, and then walked over to take an empty chair at the far end. I wasn't trying to sit in the middle or take anyone's place. I just wanted to eat like everyone else. As I pulled the chair back, Madison got up so fast it scraped the floor. She stepped in front of me and put her hand on the back of the chair like she was guarding it. Her voice was sharp and clear, aimed at the whole room, not just me. "You're just an AC tech. Go eat in the garage if you're hungry." The words hit harder because she didn't whisper them or try to hide what she meant. She said it like she was announcing a rule everyone already knew. For a moment, the room froze. You could hear the sound of utensils hitting plates, then nothing. My Aunt Janet let out a small gasp, the kind where someone can't believe what they just heard. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't know how. My brother Caleb kept his eyes down and stared at his plate. He didn't speak up. He didn't push his chair back or tell her to stop. He just avoided looking at me. My dad was sitting across the table and acted like he didn't hear a thing. My mom stood near the kitchen doorway holding a serving spoon. She didn't move. She didn't say a word. I didn't reach for the chair again. I let go of it and stood still. My hands were steady, but everything under my skin felt tight. I wasn't shocked anymore. I had already seen where the night was heading the moment she sent me to sit with the kids. This was just her taking it further, because nobody stopped her the first time. I looked around the table, not to call anyone out, just to see if even one person would speak up. No one met my eyes. The cousins pretended to keep eating. A plate got passed down the table like nothing happened. It was like the room had silently decided that letting her talk to me that way was easier than confronting her. I didn't say anything back to her. I didn't argue or ask why she thought she had the right to say that. I just stepped away from the chair and backed up a little, so she didn't think I was about to make a scene. I could feel my ears getting warm, but I kept my face blank. In that moment, it stopped being about the chair or the table. It wasn't just rude. It was a line she crossed on purpose, in front of everyone, knowing they would stay quiet. I took a breath, held it for a second, and let it out slowly. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table I helped keep warm, in a house I grew up in. I knew then that I wasn't staying much longer. Had just decided this was the day to show it in front of everyone. I didn't make a speech or slam anything when I decided to leave. I just stepped away from the table, walked to the hallway, and grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door. Nobody asked where I was going. Nobody tried to smooth things over or tell her she'd gone too far. I heard plates shifting and silverware clinking again, like the room had already moved on. Before I walked out, I turned back toward the dining room and said, "Happy Thanksgiving." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at anyone in particular. A few people paused eating for a second, but no one responded. It was like I'd spoken into an empty room. I opened the front door, stepped outside, and closed it behind me without slamming it. The air outside was cold and quiet compared to the noise inside. I walked to my truck parked along the driveway and got in without hurrying. I sat there with the engine off, staring through the windshield at the house I grew up in. The lights glowed through the windows, and I could still see shadows moving around the dining room. No one came out after me. No one called my name, not even to ask if I was okay or to tell me to come back inside. I sat there longer than I meant to. At first, I felt small, like I didn't belong anywhere. The embarrassment sat heavy in my chest. I replayed the scene in my head, the looks, the silence, her voice telling me to go eat in the garage. I thought about how I walked out without anyone trying to stop me. It stung in a way I hadn't felt before. After a while, the shame started to fade, and something else took its place. The more I thought about what had happened, the more my embarrassment turned into anger, not the wild kind, but the cold kind that sits deep and doesn't rush. I realized how long I'd let things slide just to keep peace. I thought about the work I'd done in that house earlier that day, making sure everyone was comfortable. I thought about everything I'd done quietly over the years without asking for recognition. Sitting there in the dark, I started to understand that what happened wasn't just one bad moment. It was a buildup of all the little ways I'd been dismissed and disrespected. Madison had said what she said because she believed no one would challenge her, and she was right. They watched it happen and let it. I turned the engine on after a few more minutes and let the truck warm up. As I backed out of the driveway, I didn't look at the house again. The anger settled in fully as I drove. It didn't make me reckless, it made me clear. By the time I was halfway home, I knew I wasn't going to forget any of it, and the morning after Thanksgiving, I woke up earlier than usual. I didn't feel rested, but my head was clear. The night before kept replaying in my mind, not just what Madison said, but how everyone sat there and let it happen. I didn't yell, and I didn't go back and forth with her, but I was done pretending things were fine. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and pulled out my laptop. I already knew what I was going to do before I opened it. I logged into the trust account, the one our grandmother left behind. She had set it up with the idea that it would help Madison finish school without going into debt. She trusted me to take care of it the right way, and I had done that without skipping a single payment. For 3 semesters straight, I had been covering everything: tuition, housing, books, extra fees. Every time the school sent a bill, I handled it before the deadline. I never once asked Madison to thank me or even acknowledge it. She didn't know I was the one paying, and she never asked. She just walked around like she earned her way or someone else owed it to her. As I went through the account activity, I added up what had already been paid, just under $38,000. It didn't shock me because I'd been tracking it the whole time, but seeing the total in front of me made things feel different now. There was still a little over $60,000 left untouched in the fund, enough to cover the rest of her schooling, and then some. I went straight to the payment settings. There were automatic transfers scheduled for the next semester. Housing first, then tuition, then the meal plan. I canceled every single one. The system asked me to confirm multiple times, and I did without hesitating. After that, I removed the school's billing access, so they couldn't pull money directly from the account anymore. Once that was done, I changed the administrator settings, so all notifications came to me only. I didn't touch a cent outside of stopping what was going to her. I just made sure nothing else would leave that account without my approval. When I finished, I sat back and let the quiet fill the room. There was no guilt. I didn't feel unsure or worried about what would happen when she found out. For years, I had done my part without asking for thanks. She had no problem embarrassing me in front of family. She made it clear what she thought of me and my work. Now she could live without the support she didn't know she was getting. I closed the laptop and didn't say a word to anyone about it. I didn't call my parents, and I didn't text my brother. I didn't need anyone's opinion or advice. The next steps were hers to face, and I wasn't going to shield her from the consequences anymore. Wasn't going to let things keep going the way they had been. About a week passed before I heard anything from Madison. I knew it wouldn't take long for things to catch up to her. I didn't check in or try to guess when she'd find out. I just went to work, came home, and kept to myself. Then one afternoon, my phone started ringing over and over. When I finally looked, I saw her name on the screen. I let it ring the first time. She called again a minute later. On the third try, I picked up. The first thing I heard was her breathing hard, like she'd been running or yelling before dialing. She didn't say hello or ask if I was busy. She went straight into it. The university said I owe over $12,000. They're saying my account is past due and I can't register for next semester. She wasn't asking what happened. She was accusing me without even knowing the full story. I stayed quiet and let her talk. She kept going, her voice getting sharper. They said payments stopped coming from the fund. You need to call them and fix it like you always do. I don't have time for this. That was the first time she ever admitted out loud that she knew I'd been handling things. She didn't thank me. She didn't ask why anything changed. She just acted like I had messed up my job and needed to go fix it immediately. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw what she did at Thanksgiving back in her face. I just told her the truth in a steady tone. I said, I stopped making payments. I'm not covering anything else for you. There was a pause, and then she laughed like I was joking. When she realized I wasn't filling the silence with an explanation, her tone turned harsh. What do you mean you stopped? You can't just do that. I stayed calm. I already did. The account is still there, but it won't be paying your tuition anymore. She went quiet again, trying to process it. Then she snapped. You're being ridiculous. This isn't about you. I need that money. Call them back and fix it. I told her, just as evenly. It was never the school's money. It wasn't yours to assume. Grandma left it for you, but she put me in charge of it. I used it to help you because I wanted to, not because I owed you. She didn't like hearing that. Right away, she tried to twist it. So you've been hiding money and controlling my future? You think that makes you important? You're not qualified to make decisions about my education. I didn't argue. I just said, you made it clear what you think of me and what I do. Now you can handle things without me. She called my name like she was daring me to hang up, but I didn't give her a chance to throw more insults. I ended the call without another word. She tried calling again twice, but I didn't answer. I didn't feel bad. I didn't second-guess it. She had built her life on help. When she started demanding I fix everything like before, I didn't argue or explain. I just reminded her of her own words. I said, I'm just an AC tech, remember? You don't need help from people like me. As soon as I said it, she went completely quiet. For a second, I thought the call had dropped. Then she snapped. Her voice jumped from silence to rage, and she started throwing insults like they would change something. She called me petty, selfish, dramatic, and ungrateful. She acted like I had betrayed her, even though she was the one who treated me like I was beneath her. She didn't ask why I made the decision or how to fix it. She just kept blaming me for not cleaning up her mess like always. I let her rant for a few seconds, but I didn't feed into it. I didn't yell or defend myself. I just said, I'm done, and blocked her number. No warning, no speech, no argument. I wasn't going to let her drag me into another scene. After that, I called my parents. I didn't ask for their opinion or permission. I simply told them the trust would no longer be used for Madison. From now on, the remaining money would be split between me and Caleb. I made it clear, no more tuition payments, no housing support, nothing extra. If she wanted to keep going to school, she'd have to find her own way. They didn't say much. My mother sighed like she wanted to argue, but couldn't find the word. My father stayed quiet, probably realizing he had ignored everything until it was too late. Nobody defended her this time. Nobody tried to guilt me into reversing the decision. They all knew exactly why it happened, even if they didn't want to admit it out loud. In one day, Madison lost more than just money. She lost the tuition she counted on, the housing she bragged about, and the safety net she assumed would always be there no matter how she acted. She also lost the respect she never bothered to give anyone else. The best part is I never yelled, never insulted her, and never made a scene. I didn't have to. She buried herself with her own arrogance. All I did was step back and let her face the result. Didn't respect, and now she'd have to stand on her own.